let's talk a little bit more about the numbers and why we use the first percentile, the 10th, the 90th, and the 99th. So we go and look at this data set here. Well, obviously, the minimum and the maximum are crazy. Well, there could be outliers there. So it's like, okay. Well, what do we do if we have some outliers in the data set? We know those can't be realistic minimums and maximums. So sometimes when things get kind of out of whack, you go, okay, well, let's look at the data, but let's not go right to the top. Let's try to eliminate the outliers. And so the first thing you do is, well, let's look at, we won't go all the way to the minimum, but we'll go down to the 1 percentile. So only 1% of the data is below it. And then we'll go to the 99th percentile. So we're right at the, we're not at the top and the bottom, but we're right really close to the top and the bottom. So that's what we did here. Tax rate of negative 301%. A lot better than that 1.67 million, but it's still unrealistic. You are not going to get a tax refund of 300%. That just doesn't make a lot of sense. On the flip side, you're not going to have a tax rate of 283%. Once again, much better than 13,900%, but 283%. You're going to be paying out $283 for every dollar that you make. Well, that's also kind of weird. And so, okay, maybe going right to the edge, the numbers are still kind of crazy. And so what do? We'll step back a little bit bigger. So instead of doing the first percent, we'll do the 10th percent. And instead of doing the 99th percentile, we'll do the 9th decile. And so that's when you get here. Okay, so 10% of the stuff is below 18%. Okay, that makes more sense. 90% of the stuff is below 41%. Okay, that's also great. That makes more sense. That's why we end up looking at those, the first and the 9th decile and the first and the 99th percentiles. Kind of get the data close to the ends without really going over. And so this is just how we calculate this stuff out, how we'd end up looking at the things. This is stuff that we could open up in Tableau and take a look at the histograms or the shapes of the data. So I've actually already done that just to kind of show it off. So here's if we look at the GAAP effective tax rate. And you'll see, because remember we have one unit that's at this negative 17,000 huge percent. So this isn't very useful. If we do the cap effective tax rate, so this is the one that puts in the rational bounds between 0 and 100%, you can see this data set makes a lot more sense. It's not symmetrical. It's got some outliers here at the upper end, but you can see most of the people are paying between that 0 and 2%. But that's kind of how our distribution is shaped. Anyway, let's go back to Excel, because the one other thing that we did talk about is we need to make a pivot table. So let's do that. So we'll start with by company. So I'm going to click in here, I'm going to go Insert, and we're going to do our pivot table. And so it selects all that data for me, which is great. I do want it in a new worksheet. And so the first one that I wanted is I want to do it by company. So we're going to go here, the company name, we'll drop it into rows. And then let's drop our stuff that we wanted. So net income loss. Come down here, pre-tax income, effective tax rate, and cap tax rate. I want that at the end. And so there we go. I do all want these as averages, so I'm going to right click here and go average. Unfortunately, we can't do this, all of them at the same time. Have to do it individually. Right click, summarize values by average. Right click, summarize values by average. These are numerical values, so we're going to change that to currency. These are percentages. We'll go and change these to a percentage. And so there we go. So we have our pivot table. Now I do want to filter it by the type of business, that to SIC. And so what we're going to do, instead of coming in here and going to pivot table analyze. Sorry, I had to move it. My zoom controls are there. We can go into the field list. We can put the filter here, but I don't want to do that. I don't actually like that filter. So what I am going to do is we're going to insert a slicer. And we're going to say to SIC. And there we go. So those are all of our companies. And then I'm going to come over here. And what I'm going to do is we'll make this a little bit longer. And we're going to make some changes to it. So if I come up here with the buttons, it says columns and rows. Now I'm going to make 5 columns, kind of put it all in one place. And so let's say that I wanted to go and I wanted to look at a weird one. And let's say Motion Picture Studios at 78. So I'm just going to come here and I'll pick 78. And there we go. So this now filters it all by just the movie studios, and so we can go and look at it. So, and there's other auto dealers at 55, so I can go in and say, let's go look at 55. So now I can just go and look at all those auto dealers. So that's ways that we can jump through it and look through the data. So this is something that you guys can look at. And one other thing that we wanted to do is we did want to do data by years and not just companies. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on this and move or copy, create a copy. I'll just put it before sheet 2. Say OK. Actually, I'm going to right click on this. I'm going to rename this, call this raw data. Right click on this, rename this. This will be data by company. And then right click on this, rename this. This will be data by year. So what I'm going to do with this one is I am going to change this. So I'm going to click on that, pivot table, analyze. Turn the field list back on. Instead of name in here, I'll get rid of the name. I want to go and I want to grab my tax year. Drop tax year into rows. So now if I go back to this one, this pivot table on this sheet stayed as my company. Now this one is we can look by year. And then right now it's being filtered by auto. I hit this button to clear. So these are all of the companies, and we're looking at all of the years. Now the interesting thing on this is we can sit here and we can look at, oh, tax year 2021, this is COVID, negative average of all those tax rates, negative 653%, because weird things were going on that year. You look at the other ones, and for the most part, except for a couple little bumps, the effective tax rate isn't really that much different than the GAAP effective tax rate, the capped effective tax rate. You know, 2017, that's weird. So I'd want to go and look, hey, what happened in 2017? 2021, that's COVID. I think that bank bailouts were that year. I don't remember. This is right after the housing market crash. So a lot of weird things going on with it. But this is all the data that we can look at and how we can play around with the pivot tables just to get the data out of there. And so there we go. If you have any questions, please let me know.